Good evening, and it's time for Class 5's Stories from the Shed. Episode 5, featuring Rebel, the roaring dinosaur, and also featuring our latest character, Leonora, and her black dog. Let's set the clock going. Okay, right. Small Change for Stuart by Lisa Evans. Chapter 12. Now yesterday, Stuart was using the map to look at Beeton and to plan the different places that he needed to find out all of the different clues to find his way to his Uncle Teeny Tiny Tony's secret workshop. He knew he had to go to the bandstand, the cinema, the fairground, the petrol station and the open-air swimming pool. And he found all the locations on the map. And so, Chapter 12 begins when Stuart sets off on his journey on his bike. Stuart's first stop the next day was the cinema, but when he got there, he realised that A, it was closed until the afternoon, B, it was no longer a cinema, it was a bingo hall, C, it was called the Gala, D, it was on Fitch Street, which meant that E, it was the exact place where he would be meeting Leonora tomorrow morning. Therefore, it could wait. In any case, according to the notice outside, unaccompanied children were not allowed in. He pressed his nose against the glass but could only see a foyer with a swirly carpet and a shuttered box office. He got back on his bike and headed for the park. It was quite large, with a kids' playground at one end and a bowling green at the other. The central portion was divided into a sweep of grass with neat flower beds and a large wild area. The Beeton Park Nature Reserve. Stuart peered through the chain-link fence, but could see no interesting animals or birds, only a sludgy path through bulrushes and a cloud of midges. The bandstand was in the middle of the grass area. Now, children, a bandstand that he's talking about would look something like this. This is what a Victorian bandstand would look like, and we still see them today in many parks where a band would get up and play. Okay. It was octagonal, with 8 posts holding up the roof and a twiddly wrought iron railing around the edge of the raised platform. There were still traces of gold and red paint near the top of the posts, but the whole thing looked neglected and rusty. A large weather-beaten notice board was fixed to the brickwork of the base, over which someone had stuck a poster advertising the Beeton Summer Festival. Stuart went up the steps to the empty platform. There was nothing at all to see, apart from a few cigarette ends and a dented Coke can. He didn't know what he'd expected, but he'd expected something. Perhaps a machine made in the HORTEN factory that played a selection of brass band tunes on insertion of a threepence. Feeling frustrated, he went back to where he'd left his bike and took a moment to consult the map. Next stop, the old fairground. It took him ages to find it. That was because he'd been looking for a field. He'd imagined stumbling across a broken merry-go-round or all covered in ivy. But what he found instead was a brand new housing estate with a gate across the entrance and a bored-looking salesman sitting in a porter cabin next to it. "You thinking of buying something, sonny?" he asked Stuart sarcastically. "Here, take a leaflet." Stuart glanced at the cover. "Carousel Properties, exclusive homes at affordable prices. We won't be taking you for a ride." "No, thank you," he said. He turned away and then had a thought. "Before the new houses were built," he asked, "was there anything here? Anything left over when it was a fairground?" The salesman shrugged. "Search me," he said. "You don't think I live in this dump, do you? I drive over from Birmingham every day." Stuart got back on his bike. Petrol stations next, he thought. The first 2 were modern. The third had been converted into flats and the fourth demolished. The fifth, however, was empty, with a weed-covered forecourt, cracked pumps and a boarded-up shop. Stuart walked all the way around the building. On one of the walls, some faded lettering was just about visible. Also bicycle repairs. Below it, on the ground, were 4 shallow holes in the cement, as if something had once been fixed there. I think that's important, children. I don't know what happens next, but I think that's important. Stuart walked around the building a second time and found nothing more. He sat on a wall and ate the interesting bits of his back lunch, and then, feeling grim but determined, he cycled back to the park. The bandstand was no more inspiring the second time, and there wasn't trace of a clue. Stuart leaned his elbows on the railing and looked out across Beeton Park. The playground was full of children, but the stretch of grass was almost empty, apart from a couple of dogs racing in circles. On the far side, a man with a pair of binoculars was opening the gate into the nature reserve. Stuart closed his eyes and tried to think. Had he missed something? Something tiny and subtle, something huge and blindingly obvious? He opened his eyes again. After a moment he frowned. Over by the nature reserve there were now 6 men with binoculars queuing to go through the gate, and another 9 or 10 hurrying up to catch with them. Curious, Stuart left the bandstand and walked over. All the men were wearing waterproof and carrying cameras and notebooks, and they seemed strangely excited about something. The last of them was going through the gate into the reserve just as Stuart arrived. He was shorter than the others. I think what Stuart has found is a lot of bird watchers. They're all going into the nature reserve. "Excuse me, what's happening in there?" Stuart called out. The man turned round and Stuart saw that it was actually a tall boy, not much older than himself. "We've had a rarity alert," said the boy. "A single specimen of Ixobricus minutus." "A what?" asked Stuart. It was like talking to his father. "A little bittern," said the boy. "Is that a bird?" The boy looked at Stuart in amazement. "Of course it's a bird," he replied contemptuously. "It's a bird of reed bed and swamp, hence its appearance here." "This isn't a swamp," said Stuart a bit crossly. He'd had an irritating sort of day, and now this boy was treating him like an idiot. "As a matter of fact, it is," said the boy. "The definition of swamp is an area of poor drainage. There used to be an open-air swimming pool here, and when it was filled in, it created perfect swamp conditions. Only 4 little Bittons were seen in this country last year, and 2 of them were right here. Anyway, I've got to go now. Goodbye." He went through the gate and disappeared along a path between the reeds. For a moment, Stuart was too stunned to move. And then a great wave of excitement rushed through him, and he hurried after the boy along the same path. He's found the swimming pool, children. OK, he hasn't found the fairground, but he's found the swimming pool. The reeds were very tall and the tracks narrow and muddy. Stuart turned left and then right and then left again, and soon he had no longer had any idea where the gate was. Every few minutes he'd stumble across a different group of men with binoculars. At the sound of his footsteps they'd turned to look at him accusingly, and he tried to tiptoe past. So much mud had stuck to his trainers that it looked as if he was wearing enormous brown slippers. The first sign of the swimming pool he saw was the old diving board, blotched with mould. It reared above the rushes like a diplodocus in a primeval forest. Soon after that he spotted a wooden notice board a few metres off the path. He struggled through the reeds towards it and read the faded lettering. Now let me see what it says. Beeton Park open air bathing pool. No jumping, no running, no ball games. Admission 3D. Now 3D, children, means 3 pence. That's in old money. Okay? So this is very, very old. Right next to it was a bench, the wooden slats rotten with age. "Of course, this isn't what you call an official nature reserve," said a voice from the path. "There's no restrictions whatsoever on who can visit, so school kids can just crash around all over the place disturbing the wildlife. It's not surprising we can't find what we're looking for." Stuart quickly sat down on the edge of the bench so that the passing group of bird watchers couldn't see him. He felt a bit indignant. He hadn't crashed around at all. He'd been as quiet as a... Just there was then a sudden weird barking noise just to his left. He turned his head and saw a bird perching on a dead branch. It had an orange bill and black wings, and it looked him straight in the eye before making the noise again. It sounded like a dog with laryngitis. A stampede of bird watchers came back along the path. So this must be the bird, children. This must be the bittern they're trying to find. The bird called one more time and then took to the air, flapping slowly away. The bird watchers turned round again and stampeded after it.